Hi everyone, I'm Doug Mintz with Cubicles Plus Office Furnishings. We are here on the second leg of our Florida Dream Living series. And we're interviewing all kinds of fascinating people here in the Villages, Florida, because there are so many with such fantastic stories. We want to bring them all to you. And well, you can be the judge. Today we are with Miss Nancy Lee Malm. And Nancy has quite a history. And I'm not even going to tell you what it is. We'll just start chit-chatting, and I'll let Nancy tell you all about it. How you doing today, Nancy?
Good.
Another beautiful day in the Villages, right?
That is for sure.
Now,
there's no snow.
I had no idea, Nancy, that I just learned this today. I assumed that you've been a villager for a while, and what I discovered is I'm actually a veteran relative to your experience. I've been here 4 years, and I just found out that you and your wonderful husband, Lori, have been here just over a year.
Yes.
So that's fascinating. Tell me, where did you come from before here, and what got you into the Villages?
Well, when Lori retired from medicine, he wanted to live on a remote island in the Bahamas. So we sold the airplane I had, bought the land in '76, gradually built it, and the last 14 years we've lived there full time, except when we go see our kids. And we put the house for sale, and we said, oh, it won't sell for 6 months. The second person who looked at it paid full price, but wanted it in 2 months. Where will we go? I don't know. We don't know. I don't know. How about the Villages? Okay, let's rent there. Sounds good. So we found the one and only house unfurnished for rent right now, because we had to move quick, and that's how we got here.
So 1 year ago, you're living on an island, all by yourself for the most part?
No, in the area we are is all by ourselves, very narrow, but there's people on the island. Fabulous people from all over, Sweden, England, Canada, United States.
That's amazing. So you're 80, 81, 82 years old, living on this island, living in heaven.
Yep.
Now, how did you hear about the Villages? Because obviously then you knew, let's move the Villages. How do you recall when you first heard of this place called the Villages?
We had an orthopedic surgeon friend from Cleveland, where we used to live, who lives here and really liked it, and we came to visit him several years before that. So we had been here looking. Yes. And then we found out they have 1, 2, 3 aviation clubs. That sold me.
There you go. There's a club for everything. And if there wasn't, you could have started your own. That's what they say, too.
That's what they say.
Well, we've been here 4 years, and our story isn't any different. It's amazing, everyone I chit-chat with. And everybody seems to know somebody to get them in the Villages. And everybody I meet is just quality and just fascinating people. So let's chit-chat a little bit. We met at Rotary, and we were talking a couple of weeks ago, actually, at noon Rotary lunch. And you mentioned growing up. I thought that was a really interesting story. Tell us about your father. I thought that was a fascinating story.
My father was an orphan from the beginning of his life at an orphanage outside of Chicago that was not a good orphanage, but I think it had to have been a good school. And at the age of 12, he and 2 other kids put twine around their shoes so they could run well, stole some food, put their knapsacks on their back, went to Chicago and hopped a freight train and hid behind the cargo all the way to Oregon.
Holy, so they were 12 years old?
12 years old.
And they ran away from the orphanage?
It had to have been bad.
Wow. And they went from Chicago to Oregon?
Correct.
On a train?
On the train.
The hobo life. Holy smokes. So what happens when they get to Oregon?
He got off. I won't go into details, but some older kids beat him up, and he was left bleeding, lying there. And a little boy up on the hill was eating a sandwich. He came down, said, would you like half my sandwich? And he gave him a cloth to wipe up all the blood. And he said, you know, if you're willing to work, I'll bet you my mother would take you in, because there's 8 boys. And she did. And he grew up near Portland, Oregon. And he went to 2 years of college, worked a year, went to college a year, worked a year, went to college a year. Said, I can't work anymore there. I'm done. So he ran away in the 20s to Ketchikan, Alaska, which was pretty wild back then.
Wow. So how old was he then? He must have been 19, 18, 19, 20, something like that?
Oh, probably 21.
21. So he's in Alaska. Now I know, yeah, that must have been the Wild West up there
Yes,
way back
it
then in the
must
20s.
have been.
So how does he end up in Cleveland? Because he ends up in Cleveland eventually, right?
I don't know. I have a total blank between Ketchikan and when he moved to Pittsburgh. And he met my mother in a rooming house. My mother grew up in an orphanage too. But she went in about the age of 4 or 5. And the two of them met, fell in love, and got married, moved to Cleveland. Now he's got to have had college, even though Ancestry.com couldn't find it, because he started a company there. And back then, Cleveland was big into steel, big into steel.
Right.
And he's invented a process to anneal steel. And then he said, you know, I don't have that much money. I can't spend the night. I've got to go to Pittsburgh. I've got to go to Gary, Indiana. I have to go to all these places. I got to get back. And this year I was a senior in high school, having breakfast, thinking, what shoes will I wear with my prom dress? And he said, let you and I learn to fly. I said, okay, Pop, back to the shoes. What'll I wear? So anyways, I started to learn to fly. I didn't like it much. I'd never seen a small airplane, much less been in one. But it's like you. Whenever you learn something new, it's hard, and you don't like it because you're not good at it. You have to work at it for quite a while. But then I worked at it and grew to really enjoy it. Got in a plane that was a Bonanza, which was a lot of fun to fly. And then my father bought a Twin Beach, a Super E-18, 2 big round Pratt & Whitney, 450 horsepower, that seated 6 people with a separate cockpit for the pilot and co-pilot. He said, okay, you're going to do the co-piloting and then the piloting, and we're going to go to Gary, Indiana, and Pittsburgh and Columbus, all these truly exciting places. They were horrible. But we went to Hamilton, Ontario, to the huge steel mill there, and I was the only woman doing that kind of thing back then.
So I have to rewind. This is fascinating. You're in Cleveland. Are you an only daughter then?
Yes.
So your father grows this big business in Cleveland, and he's got multiple locations in here, or maybe not locations, but he's got to travel all over for the business.
Yes.
So things are going well. He's got his lovely daughter at home. What did you want to do when you grew up? Because you obviously didn't see this necessarily coming, right?
No. I should tell you, I went to college right out of high school. I went to Rollins College, which was great back then, and it's still a great school now. But when the other girls were playing bridge before dinner, I'd run out and fly for an hour. And I had an instructor who said, Nancy, I'm going to make sure you know exactly where your wheels are so that you can touch and spin the wheels and come up, touch and spin them. And we did this on a dirt road, which is still probably a dirt road southeast of Orlando. And we're going along, and I'm getting pretty good finally. And I say, Joe, here comes a car. He said, that's all right. Just go up to the car, go up, over, and down. I said, okay. So I concentrated really hard, went up, over, and down. And I truly regret that I never could see the look on this man's face when we did that.
So
Then one more thing. So then he said, okay, we're ready. We went to the ICW, Intercoastal Waterway, on the east side, and they had just dredged some time ago and had these islands of sand with nothing growing on them yet, but they'd been there and they were firm. And so he said, okay, 3 islands, touch and go. Don't land, just touch and go. So we did 2 of them, and then I got scared, and I said, now to go do another one.
So you're flying at this point. When you're growing up, you were worried about your prom shoes. So what did Nancy want to do? Did Nancy want to be a homemaker? Did she want to be an engineer? Did she want to be a pilot?
No, be a homemaker. Funny thing, I wanted to run a hotel in downtown Cleveland. I thought of that for a while. No, back then, most of my friends just wanted to be homemakers.
So Dad says, Nancy, I got a job for you.
Well, before that, in high school, I taught swimming, and in college, I worked at Lee Wilson Engineering Company filing. My father said, if you don't graduate from college, this will be your life. Pay attention to college. And after filing for a couple summers, I said, you're just exactly right, Pop.
So your father was a visionary long before women's liberation, long before anything, and he saw his daughter doing great things and paving a road where women didn't go, quite frankly. So you're a pilot,
true.
right? You're a pilot for your father.
Yep.
And then you start flying for other companies. Is that how I understood
Small tool
that?
same airplane, small tool and die companies, mostly for Lee Wilson Engineering. But then my father knew the chairman of the board of Timken Roller Bearing, which is a very big company.
I know the name. I know the name Timken.
And he had purchased a plane called a Marine Saulnier Paris jet, a twin-engine jet that was so racy looking. And his wife flew it. So I became the second non-military woman in Ohio to fly the jet. If you want to compare it to anything in cars, you would say it looked like a Corvette.
In a plane.
It was racy.
So it was sexy.
You crawled into the top and down. And back then, women had to fly in skirts, which was quite a job. But it was twin engine, and I flew for Timken. I flew Henry Timken up to Detroit once. I was scared to death I'd do it wrong, but I was able to solo it quite frequently, which was quite something to pull into a fixed base operator, first of all as a woman, and second of all in this jet. Wow. So that was kind of fun.
So how many women pilots were there back in that day when you were flying these corporate bigwigs around?
There were no other corporate pilots, but I had friends in the 99s that Amelia Earhart started, and it had 99 members, that flew their planes. Not a lot of them, but two of them became good friends. They didn't work at it. No.
So they were more hobby.
Yes.
It was a hobby for them.
Yes.
So you're a pilot in a man's world. What was that like?
Well, I didn't have any women to compete against, and when you fly corporate, you get in the plane, you say, good morning, sir, here's your paper, fasten your seatbelt. You don't really see anybody else. But when I got further into hobby type flying, yes, I had to see the men, and it was difficult.
So that's what I was wondering, if you were accepted, or if it's like, what's this gal doing in the good old boy club?
I was told that the chief pilot for Republic Steel had his own airplane in the hangar for Republic with all the jets. I took a look at that Stearman. If you know what a Stearman is, it's an open cockpit biplane that is quite large, and it was red and white, and this very handsome chief pilot came out, and I said, if you teach, I would love to learn. So he said, okay. So we went out to a small grass field full of men with their hobby-type airplanes, and I got in, and he said, pull your seatbelt tight. So I went tight. If you're going to fly inverted, that's not right. You want to really pull it tight. Because when he rolled it upside down, I slipped about that much, and I said, I'm going to die. So I hung on to the tubing and closed my eyes and said, I'm going to die. But I didn't die, and we got right side up, and then I said, we have to go down, I'm going to be sick. So we landed, and on the grass, I threw up, and all these men went, look at that stupid woman. What's she doing out here? So you're right.
So what did that do? What did that do for you? Is it like, I'm going to show them?
No,
what
I
was
said,
your?
I'm going to quit.
You're ready to
And
quit?
I
huh?
came back to tell him the next time I'm not going, you keep the money that I paid you. And he took one look at me and he said, get in. So now I'm scared of him and the plane and everything, but I got in, which was awesome.
So you had some fans as well as some doubters that said, you just keep going, girl.
Well, I did. And then I grew to love. I still threw up. That's a lesson I want to tell people. If you get seasick and you get airsick, if you persist, you will overcome.
Well, help me when I don't throw up stepping on my ladder at home. And then we'll both be 5 steps ahead on that one. So how long did you fly?
I flew until 1976. But after I flew with Everett Dyer, I went to Oshkosh to get a small airplane that would be easy for me to fly. You know, very little controls. I could go straight up the sky. I could do tail slides back down. And they're easier than you think.
So is this the show, the big air show? You go to
the
Oshkosh for the show and then buy a plane? Or?
Yeah. I went up there to decide whether to buy this plane. And while I was there, a friend of mine had said, this very famous man named Bob Hoover is there. He will do his air show, which will bring 6,000 people for sure. You stand on the front line, and when he comes and bows, you say, hi, Bob, it's Nancy. And I said, right, in front of 6,000 people. So I did. He said, hi, Nancy, took me out. We taxied away, met this awesome man. And he took me to a Warbird cocktail party that night. Warbirds are the men who fly the the B-17s, the Spitfires, all those airplanes, to a cocktail party. And boy, did they drink. But it was an awesome event, and it was awesome to be with Bob Hoover. I admired that man so very much. And we got to meet, Lori got to meet him. And that was one heck of an event, I'll tell you, at Oshkosh. Oshkosh is very famous.
I've heard about it for years. I have some friends that fly, and unfortunately I've never been. So did you have any experience in the, what do they call the big bomber? Wasn't that called the Iron Fortress or something like that?
Yeah.
The Flying Fortress, is that what it
Well,
was?
we watched them fly in the air show the next day. Yes. And Lori and I, later in life, went back up there to watch them a couple times to see the air show there. But then I bought the pits, and I had a great time flying it. Just all that competition and air show, one air show. And then I ran into a neck fusion. And they said, no more G-loads. And I said, I don't want to fly straight and level. I want to roll around the sky. So we sold the plane and bought the land. But I didn't quit because I had met a woman.
This is the land, the island.
In the Bahamas.
In the Bahamas.
But I had met a woman on the telephone one Christmas Eve in Frankfurt. I was in Frankfurt for Christmas Eve, and I called her up, and I thought, oh, this is some dear little aunt. She has this wonderful English accent and this very high voice. It turned out to be Hannah Reich. Hannah Reich is a very famous test pilot, international test pilot. I asked Bob Hoover, and he said she's highly recognized. Hannah Reich flew for Hitler. He himself pinned the Iron Cross on her chest. And I'm sitting there talking, oh my goodness. And she said, Nancy, if you've never soared, you are never going to be a good pilot till you know how to soar. The Air Force makes their pilots soar first thing. That's how you understand what holds the plane up and how everything works. So when I quit flying, I realized I better take up soaring. Now my son lived out there, so I said to Lori, I'm going to go see Jamie. But I signed up with a woman up right near the Navy base where Lori had been, which I haven't told you about, which is interesting. And I took up soaring lessons out there. And Lori came out, and we soared separately, but with Cindy, over the top of Mount Whitney, right over the tippy top. Very impressive way to soar. And
Let me ask you about soaring. So putting it in today's perspective, would that be like extreme flying? Is that a good way to describe what soaring is?
No,
can you explain a little bit more what that is?
You can get a license to soar at age 14. There's no engine. Beautiful, long, tapered wings. Gorgeous, gorgeous.
Oh, so this is gliders?
Yes, this is
gliders. Okay, gliders.
But when you've been flying a jet and 2 engines, all that, and you come into land for the first time, you say, holy cow, you get one chance.
Now I understand. You have to know the exact science of flight when you have no engines.
Second chance.
Okay, thank you for the clarity, because I didn't understand. I thought it was like jet pilot stuff, soaring. You're talking about gliding then. I see. So you took that up after your career?
When I was done. But we didn't talk about Lori's Uncle Sam during Vietnam said, we need you, Dr. Malm. And so the Navy drafted him, and he joined the Navy. And where do you think the Navy sent him? To the middle of the Mojave Desert.
Oh, wow.
U.S. Naval Ordnance Test Station. A very secret, very powerful place where they invented the Sidewinder missiles and all that kind of thing. And we took up flying there in a club airplane owned by the Navy, who I started to fly at T-34. And he said, the instructor said, don't worry, the brakes don't always work. And I said, I beg your pardon? He said, that's all right. I said, it is. Well, I had no problem for a while, but then when they didn't work and I had no problem, I said, that's enough of that. So we rented an airplane. I rented one to go to a 99 meeting in Las Vegas, flew across Death Valley, and on the way back from Death Valley, lined it up right on the first mountain because I had no navigational aids through Death Valley, but I'd flown there a lot. And I'm sitting there looking at the chart, and 1 second, the engine quits. That quick. I looked at the oil pressure and I watched it go down, but I still tried to start it. Didn't start. So I looked down and I said, I don't know how to land on a mountain. I better go back. So fortunately, it was very high, and I headed back, and I called them and said I'd lost an engine, and he said, affirmative, and he went on with his conversation. And I said, wow, okay, no help. Put those horse blinkers on, Nancy, and remember what the scuba diver instructor said. If you are 100 feet underwater and you lose your air and you panic, you are dead. So I said, no luxury of panic, just go. So I did, and I'm coming back towards Las Vegas, and he calls and said, you don't have an engine. And I said, that's correct. So I started across, and then he started yak, 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 yak. And I remember rule number 1, fly the airplane. I turned the radio off. You can't listen to somebody that's talking to you. You got to fly the airplane. When I put the gear down, I said, I wonder if it'll go down. It did go down, but then it increased the drag tremendously. But I made it just short of the runway and bounced on the runway up. Taxied to the side and started to cry and laugh all at the same time. And a man came out in a Jeep, opened the door, stuck his head in and said, you have lots of hours, don't you? And I said, no, just enough.
What a story. It's just instinct. Instinct takes over.
No.
No?
Past training. Past training. You've got to know how to do these things. But, okay.
So that was your last day you flew?
Oh, no, 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 no.
You went
Lori
right
and-
back, like falling off the horse, and you went right back up, right?
Lori and I flew to the tip of Baja. I flew down, he flew back. And tip of Baja back in the early 60s, there was no road. There were 2 inns at the tip. That was it. It was
This is
beautiful.
Baja,
down-
California.
Yeah, it was beautiful down there then. But now I think there's a city there.
Well,
And
they
we
just
flew
ruined all
across-
your fun.
And we flew across.
They ruined all your fun, Lori, flying on the,
Well, actually,
down the Baja.
I flew down and she flew back. If you remember. I shouldn't say that, this is going on.
This is all good. It's all good.
Okay.
And you were a pilot too then?
Oh,
And I
yeah.
had to do that to defend my male ego.
He got his license out at China Lake when he was in the Navy. I want you to know that the 2 years in the Navy changed our life. We grew to really respect our country, what the young people do for us, and they give their lives for us, and we respect the Navy so much. Upon occasion, I do recognize there are other branches of the service.
So tell us a little bit about the acrobatic flying.
I went down to New Tammany Airport near Miami to learn aerobatics, and it was very difficult, very hard, and I wanted to learn landings because remember, this plane I bought was a single-seater. You couldn't take dual. The first time you went in it, you got it up there, you had to get it down. And then I had to teach myself everything. And of course, I fell out of the sky, I don't know how many times, just down. And gradually, just like anything else you learn, you get it put together. And I went back to learn for an intermediate sequence for competition. But he said, "How old are you, Nancy? Are you over 40?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "I'm not going to teach you outside maneuvers. If you have an aneurysm, you're going to die in my airplane." I said, "That's not a good idea, but I got to learn these maneuvers." So he gave me cues on how to do it. So I came back to Cleveland, and there's certain areas near a big terminal like Cleveland Hopkins you're not allowed to fly in, but that's okay. I flew in them anyways, and I went above a grass field I knew, and I practiced, and I finally learned how to do the outside loop. And I said, "This really isn't too exciting." But I went home and I told Lori, "I did an outside loop." And he read his paper and he said, "That's nice, dear. That is the only thing I have in common with Amelia Earhart. Her husband said the same thing to her when she did that."
What was your favorite acrobatic move?
Trying to do a perfectly round loop. People can do loops, but they're egg-shaped. Doing a round one or rolling upside down. I learned how to rest flying upside down. Tail slides, they're so much fun.
Now, what's a tail slide?
Well, you go straight up, and you tell the judge if you're going to go backwards or forwards. I always went backwards because the horizon came quicker, and the horizon tells you where you are. But if you set a tiny little angle, that judge is going to mark it against you. And then when you quit, there's a little piece of yarn like on a sailboat out there, and when it reverses one time, you will have gone one length of your airplane, tail first, vertically down, like that. And then you correct for it in the competition. But it's very easy. You don't realize it's as easy as it is.
And your favorite, you said your inside loop.
An
To get a
inside
nice
loop, to
round,
do a round one.
inside loop.
Or no, I think a roll, hesitation roll. They're hard, but they're awesome.
It's just so neat. Now, let's get away from flying. Your flying is fascinating. But also, I met you in Rotary, and Ray's met you in Rotary. And, you're brand new here, but when did you get involved in Rotary in Cleveland? Because obviously you've been a Rotarian for quite a while as well.
25 years ago this month of March 2019, I joined Rotary in Cleveland. And I was co-chairman of International Service Committee. We did some awesome things. Back then, you could get $2,000, scrounge up another 1,000, make it to 5, and Rotary International would give you 5, and you could do some awesome projects. And that's basically what I did. And of course, I made great friends in Rotary. I got into Rotary because at that time we were closing down Lee Wilson Engineering Company, which is at that time a publicly held company. And that's how I got into it then.
So what was your favorite Rotarian project? Sounds like you've done a few of them down there, or up there, I should say, up in Cleveland. Well, do you remember what the most rewarding Rotary project was?
Yeah, but I want to tell Ray that in Rotary. Okay, I got one. In Ethiopia, we did a lot of clean water projects. And because I said to Lori, we were looking for a project, and I said, medicine, is that the most important thing? He said, no. I said, well, housing isn't. No. Without clean water, you are dead. Okay, so we did a clean water project in Ethiopia. The women had to carry big jugs on their head and drag their kids along with them for about 4 or 5 miles to the nearest well. So we put in a well right in the middle of town, which proved to change the whole climate of that town, because now the little kids didn't have to go anywhere. So another Rotary started an elementary school for the kids, and now the women had some free time, and another Rotary started a project to teach the women how to sell their artwork that they made. And you realize that one well changed that whole town. I thought that was a great project.
And it sounds like they learned about more income opportunities through selling
Right.
artwork, which
And-
would help sustain their
Right.
quality of life.
Right.
Wow. So you're in the villages. I gotta ask you, you've joined the Rotary again. What brought you to Rotary in the villages?
Because I'm a Rotarian and I had to go to Rotary.
So once a Rotarian, always a Rotarian?
Well, that's the area that we like to give back, because, you know, our country is awesome. The United States is an awesome place to live. But you got to give back a little something to those who haven't had the opportunity you've had. And that's kind of the area that I like to use.
I couldn't agree with you more. I just have one more question for you. What else do you want to accomplish here in beautiful Florida? And your bucket list. You mentioned a bucket list off camera, and I didn't want to bring up the thought of a bucket list. We chatted about it, and it was a little macabre, so we didn't know if we wanted to bring up a bucket list. But you mentioned a bucket list, so I'm going to ask you, Miss Nancy Lee, Miss Pilot, aerobatic flyer, Rotarian, Ethiopia. What's your bucket list in this chapter here in Florida?
Same thing at the top of my bucket list forever. Move to California with my kids.
All right, Lori, you heard it here first. Probably not first.
A long time ago.
But I will tell you, I don't think we can. I'd move back by the Navy base, which is, we go every once in a while back there. It's so beautiful. It's too expensive by Laguna Beach and San Clemente. It's too busy. The highways, I can't drive anymore. I'm legally blind. Lori would have to drive at 84. Those highways are 8 lanes wide, going 80 miles an hour. That's ridiculous. Plus, California follows a little bit different beat than we do. We're from Ohio. We're kind of Midwestern people.
I know the feeling. I'm a Minnesota boy, so.
So I know we can't, but that's on top of my bucket list. But we go visit. What else would be on my bucket list? We just got back from a fabulous trip on a tall ship that we had sailed across the ocean on from Malaga, Spain to Barbados. Beautiful tall ship, 400 feet long, square sails. We did it in the year 2000. Now we took our sons and our grandsons on this boat in Barbados. We went out of Barbados, and it was just as wonderful. Of course, the very best thing about it was about being with our family. That was the best. And I was still able to get around and do things. I didn't tell them I couldn't see. And the only problem I had was in big open spaces, somebody would help me get from one place to another. And they put the lee boards up. It was so rough that I did fine. And it was just so fantastic. That's probably second on my bucket list after California. So really it's first.
So you mentioned aviation clubs here. Are you in any of the aviation clubs here in the villages? What do you like to do in the villages for hobbies and things to keep busy?
Well, first of all, we are in 2 aviation clubs, not here. One EAA, it's at Love's Landing, Experimental Aircraft Association, runs Oshkosh, that one. And then there's one in the villages, which when we went, we found out that most of the men in this club are retired F-14 pilots off of carriers or airline pilots, but there's no women much flying, but awesome pilots, not just common garden pilots flying their wonderful Piper Cubs.
They're the top guns? Is that what you...
They definitely are.
They're the top guns, huh?
They definitely are, and it's a great club. And then there's Hangar Flyers on Saturday morning, but we don't go there too much, but that is a great club too. So we have 2 great clubs in the villages. And I go to Rotary, and I'm going to a class on the Amazon River, which I've been to the headwaters of. And we're both taking Spanish, which is a bit harder than we thought to remember. But there's anything you want to do here, anything, you just think of it. Of course, golfing is the big thing here.
Do you golf?
No. We sailed. When we were young, we sailed a whole lot. I was lucky to win the Lipton Trophy, which is a big trophy nationally, twice. My husband won it once. I won it as a Wilson and then as a Malm. But yeah, we used to sail when we were very young. That's why I want to go back on this tall ship.
Nancy, you've been absolutely fabulous, and there are 2 other things I did want to mention, because you mentioned one again off camera, that you're not a one-trick pony. It wasn't just flying, and you were a very avid photographer. You want to tell us just a little bit about how you got into that and what you did? I saw just a plethora of blue ribbons and first, second place awards. When did you get into that, and what kind of stuff did you like to shoot?
Well, when I quit flying, I was very depressed, but I was getting over 5 vertebrae fused in the neck and quit soaring. So Laurie gave me a camera, and he said, start. So I started taking lessons in it, and then we started traveling to shoot, and the 2 of us found it a wonderful thing to do together. We joined a camera club, became very close friends at this camera club. And as always, it's the people you meet that make it so awesome. And it became an awesome thing to do. Just like on the island, we joined a writer's circle. Very talented people, and every Thursday morning we had to be ready to write and share what we wrote, and they would gently tear it apart. So, you know, but now I have trouble because I can't read what I wrote to correct it, but that's okay. One's got to struggle with stuff like this, right? But don't give up. Whatever you're doing, whatever you like, keep at it. Don't say I'm too old to do it. Get out there and do it.
Keep on keeping on, baby. Laurie, you wanted to say something over there.
I just think we ended up with 6 projectors doing shows around Cleveland of the trips we took. And we integrated video, so we had the river next to the Taj Mahal, and then it started moving. And it was all done put on one tape, which had 4 or 5 channels on it. One for the narration, which Nancy did, the music, and ran the 6 projectors, and showed the video. And it was all put together, so that was a task that we got into it.
Thousands of hours. Well, you know about that. Yeah, so that was
But
fun.
I think that was important, that most of the work that was displayed was Nancy's.
It wasn't just shooting pictures, it's everything that happens after that, and that's, like they say, the way the sauces is made. It's
No, there's a very important thing you learn
tedious.
when you use a tripod. First you put the tripod up, it makes you slow down. It makes you think. And pretty soon in photography, you're seeing things you never saw before you took pictures. And it's just wonderful.
Well, I wanted to close, to thank you again, both you and Lori, letting us into your beautiful home here in, guess where? The Villages, everybody. Another
course.
fascinating couple. And Lori, we probably have to come back and chit-chat with you because you've got quite a background as well. And, you know, it's the people that don't talk about it that they're the unsung heroes and just so interesting. And I wanted you to comment briefly, and you said it earlier a little bit, you touched on the most rewarding thing about everything you've done, flying, photography, the work, the play, but it was what? It
Always.
wasn't the activity as much as...
It's the people that you meet and get to know, your friends, your family most of all, but then the people that you meet through this, the people at Rotary, all kinds of things like that. That's just like Alex at Rotary, but it's the people, always.
I can't thank you enough. You've been
Thank
wonderful.
you.
Lori, you've
Thank
been
you.
great. Thanks very much, everybody. And
Good.
we'll see
We're
you
done.
on our next segment. Stay tuned, everybody. It's going to be another wonderful, awesome segment. See you next time. I'm Doug Mintz with Cubicles Plus for Florida Dream Living. Have a great afternoon.